Finance and Audit Committee meeting of May the 28th, 2026. I'd like to welcome you and also introduce my fellow commissioners. I'm Roy Priest, the chair of the committee. To my Jeffrey Merkowitz, who is vice chair of the commission, and also Paul Weech, commissioner. We constitute the Budget Finance and Audit Committee. Uh, Also to welcome staff present, and also those of you who may be joining us on Zoom. We'll start the meeting. There's no additional modifications to the agenda. The first item is the approval of our minutes of May the 15th, 2026. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. The first item under our discussion is the procurement services for approval to select a construction manager for a pool for construction management. So I will turn to our president.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, HOC team and members of the public. This first item comes before you related to our ongoing work with regards to our construction efforts. We do have an open pool that allows for us to leverage expertise to support our ongoing construction efforts. I am going to turn it over to Carlos Bonner, our Vice President of Real Estate, who's supported with Paul Vinciguerra.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Carlos Bonner, Vice President of Real Estate for the Housing Opportunities Commission. Glad to be here this morning to discuss with you the approval for construction managers for our team. My colleague Paul will now give you an overview of what this requests.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Paul Vinciguerra, Construction Manager for HOC. I don't see it. Okay, here we go. We're here today to ask approval to select construction managers into the construction management pool under request for qualifications, RFQ 20. There was a prior construction management pool that expired, and this action will reestablish the pool. This will assist staff to select highly qualified construction managers on an as-needed basis. The approval is to select 7 qualified firms into the construction management pool under RFQ 20, request for qualifications 20. Okay, we keep that up. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. This is the scope of work. Okay. There we go. The 7 firms, we issued an RFQ a couple months back. We received 12 proposals. Out of the 12 proposals, scored 7 of the firms that scored higher, ranged from 71 to 89 points, and had to score a minimum of 70 to be included into the construction management pool. There is no immediate budget impact to reestablish the construction management pool. At the time of construction manager award, the applicable fees would be allocated on the individual development or property operation budget. A few things about the 7 respondents. A few key highlights regarding the qualified funds. 4 of the 7 construction management companies have prior experience on HOC projects, and 3 of the construction management companies are certified MFD firms, all of which experience ranges from mid to large complex projects, including high-rise multifamily. And then we're including 3 new firms in the construction management pools for HOC. Okay, next slide, please. Keep going. All right, that's good. Due to the type of projects we leverage for CM services, some of the firms did not meet the qualifications due to the size and scale of the projects. The firms below meet the criteria, scoring above the required 70 points to qualify. The scoring team consisted of representatives from 3 various divisions throughout HOC. And we reached out to compliance, maintenance, and procurement, and we have approval from those 3 divisions as well for the pool for construction management. As I mentioned before, there's no adverse budget impact at this time. We're here to ask for recommendation for the Budget and Finance Committee to move this to formal action at the June 10th commission meeting and to authorize the president, executive director, without further action on its part to execute 7 individual $0 contracts for construction management services with API Construction Management, First Choice Construction, JDC Construction, Jones Lang LaSalle, otherwise known as JLL, America's LLC, Lambus Rank LLC, Leaders Rep Consulting, and S&H Group. That's all I have right now. I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions? I am glad to see that we are adding 3 new companies to our construction pool, and I hope that they will have as much opportunity as our previous ones have had through our pool. So I look back at the information you provided, and the companies that have been in our pool have been doing pretty well in terms of being able to provide services to the agency. So I hope that our new companies will have the same kind of experience.
Yes, sir. They do.
Any questions? Can I get a motion to advance this forward to the full commission?
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. So ordered. Thank you very much.
Also just wanted to welcome Carlos to HOC. Good to have you here.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Welcome.
This will be the easiest thing that you do.
Thank you.
First of all, okay, I didn't turn my thing on. The next item on our agenda is the fiscal year 2026 third quarter unaudited financial statements. And we will proceed as soon as we get technology completed. Do you need that?
Thank you, Commissioners. This item is one that comes before the BFNA every quarter in regards to opportunity to look at how our agency is positioned financially. Our CFO as well as our Assistant Controller will provide more details, but on a high level, you will hear and learn that our agency's financial health is stable and healthy. You will also hear about some of the changes that we've experienced as it pertains to the timing of commitment and development fees, how that impacts our cash flow and our financial position, as well as our property performance. But overall, the agency's financial position is positive. With that, I will turn it over to Tim Getzinger, our CFO.
Thank you, President Andrews, Commissioners, and the viewing public. For the record, Tim Getzinger, Senior VP of Finance and CFO. This morning, the finance team will be presenting 5 items, including the unaudited financials, budget to actuals, a budget reforecast, tenant write-offs, and a piece on the calendar year audits. The following is a high-level summary of the agency's FY26 Q3 financial position, and staff will provide details on the aforementioned presentations. HOC's financial health remains stable. Total assets climbed to $2.5 billion, the highest in agency history, driven by real estate activities, including an increase in mortgage loan receivables and restricted long-term investments. Net position continues to be strong at $308 million, which is the second highest quarterly close in 4 years and $1.2 million higher than last quarter. However, it is lower than last fiscal year, driven by a $10.2 million operating loss, partially offset by a $7.8 million in non-operating revenue. Current and quick ratios are down slightly from the end of the fiscal year at 1.65 and 1.4 respectively, driven by the undrawn mortgage proceeds payable from the Sage bond issuance. If the current and quick ratios are adjusted for this, the ratios would be 3.89 and 3.3 for March 2026 respectively. The undrawn mortgage proceeds, currently sitting at $145 million, are expected to be drawn within a period of 3 years. HAP utilization is stable and up from the end of the fiscal year and is sitting at 96%. Tenant arrearages reduced by over $2 million, and it sits at $14 million, which is a 7-quarter low. We are cautiously optimistic that this trend will continue. A review of our 9 development funds are also demonstrate stability and are projected to improve with upcoming commitment and development fees. Reserves, including the general fund operating and property reserves, are stable. Regarding the budget actuals, post-COVID normalization is underway, and later this morning, we will provide a reforecast for Q4. However, for Q3, the quarter-over-quarter total budget variance, factoring for all 5 agency funds, increased by less than $150,000 after posting 3 consecutive quarters in excess of $4 million. This is the lowest variance in 3.5 years, and as per the reforecast, we are projecting a similar modest variance for Q4. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can advance to the next packet item, which is our unaudited financials for the first quarter of fiscal year 2026. And before we go to that, I do want to note that we are tweaking the format for next quarter, and it's going to be more graphic so that it's a little bit easier to follow. We'll have the key changes in the balance and income statement and those drivers, followed by a detailed analysis of the changes in both the income statement and the balance sheet and some takeaways from it. I think it'll be a lot easier for both the commission and the audience to be able to follow.
Just one comment. I always find it interesting that, especially when you're talking about these ratios, and you point out what's happening with them. If you say, but if this happened, they would have been this. I said, so always. But I like the 3.8 and 3.7 or whatever. And, but I just want to acknowledge that I do observe that you always are pointing out the positive upside if something else happens.
For when?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ebbs and flows in the cycle. Okay.
Any other question? Go ahead.
Okay, presenting the first item will be Nikita Patel, our Assistant Controller.
Good morning, Commissioner, HOC staff, and the public. Today, my name is Nikita Patel. I'm Assistant Controller. Will be presenting the unaudited financial statement for Q3 fiscal year 2026. Can you please move to page 9? Sorry, page 8. As of quarter ended March 31st, 2026, the Commissioner total asset, including deferred outflow, amounted to $2.5 billion, and increases of about $255 million or 11.41% from the fiscal year ended June 30, 2025. The total liabilities increased by $257 million or 13.63% to $2.1 billion, and the deferred inflow of resources also increased by $0.7 million or 1.69% to about $42 million. The net position decreased by $2.4 million from $310 million due to combined effect of $10.2 million operating loss and $7.8 million of non-operating income during the 9-month period covered July 2025 to March 2026. The liquidity ratio have changed slightly from last year but continue to indicate stable financial health. In March 2026, the current ratio was 1.65 compared to 1.85 in June 2025. The quick ratio was 1.4 in March 2026 and 1.57 in June 2025. The decrease is mainly due to an increase in current liabilities attributed primarily to $145 million underdrawn mortgage proceeds payable from a new bond issued for HOC website Building B. Adjusted for this amount, the current and quick ratios in March 2026 would have been 3.89 and 3.3 respectively. Both the increase in total assets and total liability primarily due to the issuance of 150 million multifamily housing development mode 2026 series for the SAGE project, as well as 30 million single family mortgage revenue bonds 2025 series A and B. The new bond issued are mainly driven in an increase in mortgage and construction loan receivable of 138 million, restricted long-term investment of 101 million, and in restricted cash and cash equivalent of 114 million. Other major contributing factors include the additional draw from the PNC real estate line of credit for Wheaton Metro Gateway and the OHRF for the SAGE project, partially offset by the payoff of the Elizabeth House 3 and the Willow Manor advances from PNC real estate line of credit. The scheduled amortization of multifamily and single-family mortgage receivable and the FFP loan receivable from the discrete component unit. Similarly, issue of this new multifamily and single-family bond was the primary cause of the increase in the total liability. Bond payable and underwritten mortgage proceed payable grew by 135 million and 145 million respectively. Net of scheduled bond redemption under the multifamily fund and single family fund. The increase in liability also due to increased borrowing on the relock for Wheaton Gateway, Dunkirk Farm, and Emery Group. An increase in loan payable to Montgomery County, mainly due to the receipt of a non-profit preservation fund loan for the Linley and the additional McPhee funding. This increase is partially offset by the repayment of EH3, the SAGE, and the single-family loan from the PNC line of credit and a normal amortization of FFP loans. Can you please move to page 10? Combined statement of revenue and expense. The Commission recorded a net loss of 2.4 million in the first 9 months of fiscal year 26 compared to 4.5 million in the same period of fiscal year 25, excluding the unrealized gain on investment of 2.3 million in fiscal year 26 and 2 million in fiscal year 25, as well as the 740,000 gain on sale of assets in fiscal year 25. HOC ended with an adjusted net loss of 4.7 million in fiscal year 26 and 7.2 million in fiscal year 25. This is primarily attributed to an increase in operating expense, largely driven by interest expense under the HPF limited obligation bond, as well as the Battery Park, Bradley Crossing, and Battery Lane. Maintenance expense primarily at Timberlawn, Westwood Tower, the Oak at Four Corners, Battery Park, Scatterside 1 and 2, State Rental Property, Metro Point, and Red 6. Utility expense mostly at Westwood Tower, Battery Park, Glenmark Crossing, and other property expenses, including property insurance, solid waste, real estate taxes, fire system, single family cost of insurance, and prior period adjustment. This unfavorable variance was partially offset by an additional rental income from Battery Park, Forest Oak, Cider Mill, VPC1, Wheaton Metro LP, Red 6, Sandy Spring, Alexander House Development Corp., and Bradley Crossing. Offset also includes deferred development fee from the calendar year 2024 cash flow distribution and receipt of a state grant for the new statewide voucher program. The housing assistance payment revenue increase within the HCV main program, HCV income portables, and mainstream program. App expense also increased mainly due to higher authorized per unit cost. The total operating revenue when adjusted for unrealized gain on investment and HAP revenue increased by 10.54 million to 143.9 million in fiscal year 26 from 133.3 million in the last fiscal year. Every income category registered an increase with the exception of other grant, which posted a nominal decrease of 61,000 compared to same period last year. The total operating expense increased after adjusting for the half expense, rising by about 10.9 million from 145.2 million in fiscal year 25 to 156.1 million in fiscal year 26. All the expense category contributed to the increase except administrative expense which decreased by about 3 million. The non-operating net revenue slightly increased from 7.6 million in fiscal year 25 to 7.8 million in fiscal year 26, mainly due to increase in non-operating interest expense, partially offset by a decrease in interest income on mortgage and construction loan receivable, investment income, and other grants. More detailed information is provided to the notes to the financial statement on page 14 through 18. This concludes the financial statement presentation. We would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions?
There's just a couple. One comment, it's good to see the increase in revenues, at least outpacing the increase in expenses. I was curious about the increase in the rental income and the extent to which that reflects mainly the VRG or versus lower vacancies or
I think we're going to go into detail on that budget to actuals. What I would say is that, yes, it does have to do with the VRG. Also, on the income statement, we are comparing quarter over quarter for the fiscal years, so that there were some properties that were added and went from the calendar year side to the fiscal year side. The calendar year side, we're not counting the rents because they're all restricted. In the fiscal year, we do. So there is some increase because of the added properties as well as the VRGs, yes.
I was going to ask about the increase in utilities as well. I don't know if you want to wait till the next presentation or...
It would probably be best because we can nail it down at the property level, yes.
Okay. So that's all I've got right now. I'm good.
No other questions? Yeah. I had the same question about the children. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item for discussion this is the budget to actual.
Yes, Commissioners, this is our third quarter of FY26. You will hear how we're coming along in regards to our budget to actuals. As requested by the Commission, subsequent to this presentation, you will have another presentation that trues up our FY26 based on the data we have to date on where we expect FY26 to land. And then subsequent to that presentation, you don't see it on your agenda, but we have another presentation that I'd like to offer around really spotlighting what those variables were. So we'll walk you through step by step, starting with where are we right now, and I will turn it over to our finance team and Cedric Cord, our assistant budget officer, who will get us started.
Good morning, Commissioners, President Andrews, and the viewing public. For the record, I'm Cedric Cord, the Assistant Budget Officer here at HOC. I will be discussing the third quarter budget to actual statements for FY26. If we could start on page 15 of the packet, attachment A at the very top of the page. Overall, the agency ended the quarter with a negative variance of $10.14 million, based on a net cash flow shortfall of $10.7 million, compared to the anticipated third quarter net cash flow shortfall of negative $584,000. The primary causes were lower unrestricted cash flow in most of the Development Corporation and Opportunity Housing properties because of property performance, coupled with lower income in the general fund, partially offset by savings in various expense categories in the fund. Looking here at the general fund, still in attachment A at the top of page 15. The general fund consists of basic overhead costs for the agency. It is expected that the general fund will operate at a loss. This fund ended the quarter with a deficit of approximately $5.9 million, which resulted in a positive variance of $587,000 when compared to the projected deficit of $6.4 million. As of March 31st, 2026, income in the general fund was approximately $2.4 million lower than budgeted, and expenses were $2.9 million lower than budgeted. The negative income variance was primarily the result of delays in the receipt of commitment and development fees for FY26. The impact to the FY26 general fund, due to the size and timing of certain fee income through March 31st, 2026, was a shortfall of approximately $1.77 million when compared to budget. If the fees had been received as planned, income in the general fund would have a negative variance of just $581,000. In addition, there were also lower draws from the OHRF for real estate personnel and pre-development costs. The impact of the lower fees and draws on income was partially offset by higher interest income earned on unrestricted cash in the general fund, coupled with higher management fees paid by the HCVP program as a result of higher administrative fees received. That was partially offset by lower bookkeeping income paid based on lower than anticipated utilization through the third quarter of FY26. The positive expense variance was primarily the result of lapse in salary and benefits, coupled with savings in consulting fees, computer software, online information services, miscellaneous contracts, and capital projects, which resulted in lower transfers from the operating budget to cover the costs of the projects. A portion of this savings is timing related and not expected to remain at year end. Next, we'll move to the multifamily and single family bond fund that we can see here in the same table on page 15. The multifamily bond fund and single family bond fund are budgeted to balance each year. Income, the bonds drawn down that finance the administrative costs for these funds, is consistent with the budget. The multifamily and single family bond funds experience positive expense variances of $541,582 and $225,143, respectively, as a result of salary and benefit lapse, coupled with savings in professional services. Next, we can move to the Opportunity Housing Fund. If we can scroll to the top of the next page on page 16. Bad debt and vacancy loss were the primary drivers of increased negative variance across most properties. Some of the bad debt overages are attributed to increase in non-paying tenants during the quarter. Additionally, the properties experienced higher maintenance costs due to higher than anticipated unit turnover, which corresponds with the higher vacancy loss. First, we have in this table on the top of page 16, the Development Corporation properties in attachment B. The chart is broken into two pieces, unrestricted and restricted properties. For the properties with unrestricted net cash flow, this group ended the quarter with a negative cash flow of $957,000, or $4.4 million less than projected. As mentioned in our review, we determined that the variance is often largely attributable to such items as lower tenant income due to lower gross rents and higher vacancy, coupled with higher bad debt, maintenance, and utility costs. The higher bad debt is largely due to continual non-payment in some of the units, and this may continue as we will take some time to remove these non-paying residents from the units as we move through lease enforcement procedures. Moving now to the second group, properties with restricted net cash flow, at the bottom of page 16 in this same chart. The shortfall from this group of the Development Corporation properties was $482,000, more than budgeted through March 31st, 2026. Next, we have the Opportunity Housing properties in attachment C on the top of page 17. Group 1 are the properties with unrestricted net cash flow. These properties experience a negative cash flow of approximately $2 million, which is $6 million lower than projected. Group 2, properties with a restricted cash flow, at the bottom of page 17, cash flow for this group was $728,000 lower than budgeted. If there are any questions you have at this moment, I'll take a pause and take any questions to address at this time. So we will move to the public fund here on page 18 of the packet. Here we see the HCVP voucher program. Overall, there was a surplus of $2.2 million. The surplus was comprised of housing assistance payment revenue that exceeded HAP expense by $1.7 million, coupled with administrative surplus of $451,000. The administrative surplus was a result of higher fee income and lower administrative expenses, mainly due to staff turnover, lower contract costs, and the timing of online information services payments that were paid in June 2025 for FY26. The higher administrative fee income was primarily the result of a proration reconciliation for CY25. Lastly, if we scroll to the capital expenses in attachment E on page 19, there were a number of properties with unplanned capital expenditures with sufficient reserves to cover the expense. This concludes the presentation, and happy to address any questions you may have.
I guess if now's the time to talk about utilities and wondering like what's driving that, if that, how much of that is increase in energy costs?
There's a full presentation on that coming soon.
Oh,
So
okay.
let's do the next presentation has to do with the true up and the reforecast. To just at least share out what that is, and then I'll have the property management, asset management, and maintenance team come to just give the updates in regards to property performance. Does that sound good?
I can add just a little bit of higher level.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Feel free.
So we did touch on increases of revenue because of new properties, and so there's also going to be corresponding increases in those expenses, particularly utilities and maintenance. Additionally, this is taking into consideration the cost of the HQ, which also has additional utility maintenance costs. And so when we do take a look at maintenance, as reflected in the notes on the financial statements, we mentioned that Battery Park was a driver in some of the increased maintenance costs. But again, that's one of the new properties, as well as Forest Oak Towers. And in the notes in the utilities and the financial statements, we note both Forest Oak Towers and Battery Park. So it is being driven at least slightly from those new properties and the HQ.
Have we started, I don't know when, but whether we've started seeing increases in utilities prices due to some of current events? You know, I know whether it's the war, whether it is data centers, there's been a lot of pressure on utility costs.
Right. I do know personally that utility costs have gone up in
Yes.
Montgomery County. Obviously, I think we're not immune from those increases. We do not have that level of detail in this current presentation, but we can definitely come back to share where we've seen increases just based on the per unit cost of electric as well as water. So, yes.
The only other thing I was going to add was just the HAP or voucher utilization, which, happy to see that at 96%. Congratulate the staff for getting that back up. I know, as I recall, I think we would be hitting a little bit of a ceiling due to failure.
Zero inflation, yes. So we will definitely, and our team's working very closely. Terry Fowler, the budget officer, working very closely with our HRD team to forecast out where we need to be and what lease-up needs to, where we need to land in terms of utilization to not get to a point where we're not able to cover our current expenditures. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
One question, as you pointed out, that Valley Lane, Valley Park, and Valley Crossing are responsible for a substantial portion of the negative side of the variance on those properties. I just wonder, going forward, do we anticipate that this level of expenditure and outlays is going to continue? I mean, we ran into situations there we didn't anticipate, I know, when we bought those properties. What are we looking for?
That's a big part of this next presentation. So let me get our teams to to do the shuffle so that we can get there, so that we can then, it seems like there's going to be a lot of questions. We anticipated these questions, but we also had to, and I think you need to move to advance this item to the full commission, the budget to actuals. So we needed to take care of some of those housekeeping items before we got to the next part of the presentation.
Can I get a motion to advance the report on budget to actual for the third quarter, fourth quarter?
Second.
All in favor signify by aye. Opposed, nay. So ordered.
Okay, in this next presentation, you will hear our reforecast. However, we will, after Ms. Fowler presents the reforecast, allow for our operations leaders, property management, asset management, and maintenance to come forward to share more details on what caused those variances and what we're doing about them. Okay.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good morning, commissioners, staff, and the viewing public. For the record, my name is Terry Fowler, Budget Officer for HOC. And as President Andrews mentioned, we did work on a forecast for projecting year end because there's a period of time we meet in May and you don't hear about how we ended the year until September. So we brought the teams together. This was a cross-divisional effort that included our maintenance team, our real estate team, our asset management team, our property management team, and finance. But I will say that it is a moving target. And so we will present the best information we had when the packet was prepared. And I will let you know of a change that we told in the packet that could happen that has. But with that being said, if we could turn to page 2 of the packet. And just a reminder, this is the presentation that you just heard showing where we ended at the third quarter with a shortfall of about $10.7 million. If we move to the next page, this is the projection that was prepared. The process that was used, we first started working on this with February actuals. And the divisional teams got together and looked at what was currently happening with our real estate and mortgage finance transactions, as well as our property performance, and projected what they anticipated to occur from March through June. We then took that information and updated it for March and April actuals when they became available and did another trajectory for May and June. And so you'll see in the general fund that at the third quarter, we had a positive variance of approximately $586,000, and we are projecting a more positive variance at year end. That's primarily due to the continuation of some of the savings we're having in expenses, as well as fees that we are anticipating to come in the fourth quarter. Those fees include things that were included in the budget, as well as additional fees that we did not anticipate receiving in this year. I will note that Metropolitan, which is one of the fees that was anticipated in the fourth quarter, we did note that there was a chance of that slipping to July, and that has occurred. So this will change due to that. But what that means is, President Andrews has said it many times, timing is very difficult when there are so many factors influencing how a transaction moves through the stages. And not getting it in June means, yes, fiscal 22nd may look a little worse, but the money comes in July, which means that positive impact will be incorporated into the budget we'll present to you on June 10th. So the money will come, it's just the timing crosses a fiscal year. And then moving into the properties, the primary factors that we looked at were the things we've been telling you about all along. What is happening with our vacancy loss? Where are we? Where were we in February? How did that change from February to April? And what is the trajectory for that? So we forecasted that. We took it a step further, and you're going to see the impact of that step further when we bring the proposed budget, because we also aligned this reforecast for the end of this fiscal year with what our FY27 proposed budget stated we would start. And we looked at those factors, specifically vacancy loss and bad debt, to ensure that where we are and how we're going to move in the next couple of months aligns with the budget. There were places where we felt that we should adjust the budget we're going to present to you in June. Some moved in a positive direction because we have achieved greater results than we anticipated when those budgets were first developed 6 months ago. Because our budget cycle was so long, they were started looking at actuals through September. We then looked at actuals through December. And as you can see, the environment and the culture, financial situation we're in changes almost on a daily basis. So we did that projection, and as I said, you will see adjustments that we've made to both vacancy loss and bad debt in the proposed budget for 27, because if we know we're at a different point now, we don't want to present to you in June something that was based on prior actuals. So that is how we forecasted with the properties. As President Andrews has mentioned a couple of times, the operations division, mainly asset management, property management, and maintenance, looked at all the data, all the actuals, what's happening now, and have put together a presentation of what is driving these variances that we have. And where it's something in our control, what can we implement to make improvements on that? So I do think you're going to get a wealth of information that will explain the story behind the numbers. Sometimes it's hard. We tell you the numbers, and you want to understand all the details, but we really need our partners to come up who are living and breathing the properties to give you that level of detail. So this is projecting about an 8.8 million at the end of the year, but again, we already know that the Metropolitan has changed, and there could be other changes because the courts and how we move through the bad debt, but we will advise you where we ended and any changes that affect this that we know now will be incorporated into the budget if they have a long-term impact. And I'd be happy to address any questions you might have on the process or the results or where we go from here.
Well, Terry, thank you so much. One thing we always talk about is the unpredictability of the development fees and other fees and when they arrive from timing. So I'm just curious, how big an impact is it that the Metropolitan slipped to July?
Well, it's
in dollar terms.
Yeah, and let me just look at it because I did say it. It's about $1 million to the general fund.
Right. So we would have been at a 7 million.
No, this included getting the fees. So this forecast, when we did it, we anticipated the fees coming in.
We're having before us now.
Yes. So this will go in a negative direction. Yep. But I will tell you, many discussions occurred with that because staff does everything humanly possible to get deals getting to that finish line.
Sure. No,
but because we're in a position where we have a shortfall in this current year, but because we're still working through stabilizing our properties, we have a shortfall next year. Our senior executive vice president asked Terry, if it comes in June or July, what's the major impact? 1 year's going to look worse. 1 year's going to look better. The money is the money.
Yeah.
So let's make sure the deal's right, and the money's going to get here when it comes.
Just to comment on that, and I appreciate that, and yes, I mean it's. Some of it is absolutely just shifting it to a later fiscal year. I guess I wouldn't say that there's no cost. Obviously, time value of money,
right.
And to the extent that we may have to use other funds or or what, opportunity costs that, that we're losing out on, whether any interest gains or investment gains or interest expenses that we have to pay, to make up the difference. So, but yes, so when it's like a month or two, that's not a big deal. I guess, when it ends up being like a year or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for Metropolitan, we are talking about probably a 15-day span that just happens to cross over the fiscal year. And I will tell you that when we are developing a budget, and we're working with mortgage finance and real estate, and we have transactions that look like they're going to deliver late in the year, we have very detailed discussions of how certain is that, because you can have a small slip that affects your full fiscal year. So we do look at that very closely, especially if a transaction is anticipated to come in the fourth quarter.
So it looks like between the general fund and the OHRF, those are two factors, the big swing factors between the amount that was forecasted 10, where we are 3 at third quarter, to the end of the year, which you're now saying probably about 9.8. So
yes, that is where the big swing is. It's in the anticipated fees that are coming in the fourth quarter. The property performance is not going to change significantly in 2 months, but fees, especially one-time fees, that can really swing the income in the general fund and the income that's going to the OHRF, because they're split between the two funds.
okay.
Okay, thank you. At this point, what I'd like to do again is bring up our leaders from property management. That's Ross Lloyd, our Vice President of Asset Management, Kelly Dickerson, and our Vice President of Maintenance, Sean Asbury, to provide you with this additional insight in regards to the operations. These materials will also be uploaded for the public's viewing on our website as well, and disseminated to commissioners subsequent to this presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. President Andrews. For the record, my name is Ross Lloyd, Vice President of Property Management. And today we wanted to just kind of go over highlights of the portfolios, and we separated them from HOC managed and contract managed, and just give you some highlights on where we see some struggles within the portfolio, and we'll go through that. All right. Next slide. Next slide. This first slide actually will show you from the cash flow deficit side of the properties. And what we wanted to do was show you what are the drivers of that from our scatter site portfolio. And as you see, there are 5 properties that are reflecting where we are having a deficit. And this particular deficit reflects when we minus out expenses, debt service, vacancy, where these properties sit. And as you see, there are 5 properties in our scatter site portfolio that are the main drivers. Any questions on those?
Commissioners and members of the public, you see a lot of acronyms here, some of which may or may not make sense. This is how we've categorized our different scattered sites. They're based on when they were financed and or terms that were created many years ago by our finance team and or the team in terms of how we categorize these different groupings. But this is our portfolio that supports, quite frankly, some of our lower AMI residents, of course. And so you can see the impact of challenges when there's lack of rent. And you also know, as we've discussed previously, that the scattered sites portfolio doesn't really generate a great deal of revenue. So in addition to what happens when we're not receiving rent, the agency has to help supplement costs for expenses for this portfolio significantly. And so just wanted to spotlight that. We can continue to go to the next few slides. Yes.
One question. Oh,
Sure.
Go ahead, Jim.
Do you have a sense of like what share of units does this reflect?
So for the first property, that is our scattered site one. That is looking at this particular property, it's 190 units, but that is actually the top properties are large properties. So that's why the numbers are so great. And that's where you see the biggest exposure for us.
Hmm. I guess I'm thinking about our total portfolio, and I mean, so it's 5 properties primarily, but I guess what do we have a sense of share of units that reflects?
Yeah, for most part, and this is just on
We have
average,
about
you're
what
looking at
9,000
about,
units or something.
yeah, you're looking at about 700, units or so, give or
Mhm.
take.
So
It's a
less
good,
than 10% of our total units.
correct. Or a little, or slightly more.
Okay.
If you look back historically at on performances like what you're showing here, these properties always show up on the property as ones that are really costing us more to operate than we are generating really in revenues.
Correct. And you'll see that in the later slide because these properties play hand in hand to our expenses. And I'll get to the next slide.
On that point, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about scattered sites. I mean, they offer a range of housing to people who really need them. They are also ones that require considerable amount of outlays for capital expenditures for those properties. It says at a point in time, how long do we want to keep them in our portfolio? There's some other way that we can to continue to benefit the people who benefit, at the same time figure out a way that it's not a loss leader continually. There's a way that we can reduce our liability in some way, reducing the portfolio, doing whatever we could do. I mean, what are you all thinking in that regard?
I think when you look at the scattered site portfolio as a whole, I think we need to look at the capital side of it and actually weigh out, and after 10 years, do we keep that property based on what we have to put into it, or do we look at, maybe selling that property at that time? So if we're going to invest in scattered site, we have a high turnover in terms of we buy, we sell, we buy and sell. So that way, from a capital standpoint, we're not actually sinking more money than we can get out. So say, for example, if we're doing a renovation on a unit, on one of our scattered sites, and it's $100,000, when do we get that return from a resident that moves in that may be paying 1,900?
Well, and commissioners, there are a lot of nuances with our scattered sites portfolio. Remember, we have presented a couple of times on scattered sites, the portfolio overall. There are financing obligations, there are affordability covenants. We have presented to you just recently, and thank you for approving, the ability to sell some of our scattered sites, a handful of them that weren't encumbered, and we are now in conversations with the state in regards to the state partnership units. To the extent we have flexibility to promote homeownership opportunities and to have an opportunity to reduce this portfolio that is in line with mission, we're advancing that. But there is a larger discussion where we have a portfolio that is aging. We've purchased these properties 30, 40 years ago, and at some point we will have to make a different call in regards to what we do, but we're not quite there yet. I'm pleased to say, and you'll hear that there's been a lot of great work in terms of stabilizing the portfolio. But as it ages, 40, 50 years later, we will need to think through what we do when we have those opportunities, when there aren't covenants and or through advocacy with our partners, state and county, to reduce some of those covenants so that we can have more options with this portfolio. Okay, so it's not just a unit by unit. I'm certain, of course, our maintenance and our property management team can point to any home and say, this is really difficult to keep alive, in terms of profit and in terms of the amount of expenditure. But if it has a covenant that doesn't allow us to sell it, then we're doing the best we can with that property. We're trying to leverage it as best we can for the families that we serve.
Yeah, it's interesting that about a month ago, an article that appeared in one of the publications about what Philadelphia was doing about expanding their affordable housing inventory. And what they were doing, which we can't do here because we're in a very different price point for the cost of housing than they are in Philadelphia.
Right.
Okay. But what they were doing was that properties were down in terms of valuation. So they were going in and buying a lot of properties and putting them into their portfolio. And I don't know what the conditions of those properties were or what the outlays may have been in terms of actual capital investment required. But that was a way that they increased like 500 units they bought uh, at one point. So all of a sudden now we've got 500 more units we can put into affordability. That's not necessarily a strategy that we have. But I know at one point in time we were getting a lot more right of first refusal things. I haven't seen one of those in a long time,
We
Kaylee.
do, we do. We constantly get opportunities to purchase additional scatter sites. We have our hands full with our current scatter sites in terms of the maintenance and the level of involvement that it takes to manage the portfolio. When we get to a stage where we're able to shed some of our older portfolio, we will then also at the same time present an opportunity to acquire newer assets, but to expand with new assets as well as try to maintain the nearly 2,000 older portfolio all at the same time is not manageable. And so that larger presentation on the scattered sites disposition and or repositioning, we can refresh that for the commission. But definitely there will always be the right for HOC. So we brought this up as well when we brought the presentation to dispose of a couple of the last scatter sites. We shared that in the future, we can also begin to acquire again. We're not just quite there yet. But we do have a number of slides. I do want to make sure we get a chance to go through them. Let me
Madam
ask.
President, though, before we go to the
Yes.
next slide, quickly clarifying your answer to Jeff.
Sure.
So, for example, scattered site one shows a $644,000 cash flow loss. How many units does that cover?
So I would have to give you the exact count, but I
Okay.
know it scatters like one. If I'm looking at that one correctly, it's 190. It may be a little bit more, but I'll give you that.
That's the number you said,
Yeah.
Jeff. So that's what I wanted to understand. And then the top five losing portfolios, you said were about 700.
Right.
Correct.
And
Altogether,
I would
rolled
ask,
up.
I would just ask because of course we don't have those unit numbers right here. In all of these acronyms, we try our best, but I didn't ask the team to have that level of detail. So I don't want to
Orders
hold
of
on
magnitude.
to if
Orders
it's
of magnitude.
740 or
Yeah, it was just
come back and it's
a
940,
guesstimate.
right?
In your response earlier, Chelsea suggested that within that 190 units, some of them are probably doing better than others. So that
Correct.
640 million,
And as we go
640,000
through,
we're losing is even a smaller segment of that total portfolio.
correct. And as we go through the slides, you'll see some of the shortfalls and areas where we're trying to gain. And on the next slide, if you go to our revenue shortfalls, as you see, one more slide right there, you'll see the same properties are actually at the top tier. And, we're working through in terms of property management, identifying these properties are key properties that we need to watch and actually rally around to actually make sure that we're increasing the occupancy, getting rid of residents that are not paying and working with Sean and Kelly to make sure that we're getting the best pricing and we're positioning these properties in the best way that we can to ensure that this doesn't happen again. All right. Next slide. This slide, one more slide. This slide really actually speaks to just in terms of bad debt and maintenance. And if you actually look on the right side, you'll see where our expenses are really falling. So 55% of overall expense for our scatter sites is maintenance. And that is actually due to turning units. And with the cost of expenditures today, it's just rising. And you see where the 34% is bad debt. And that's actually, working through our lease enforcement to make sure that we move through that process pretty swiftly, along with our utility costs that came up. And our utility cost is there due to our vacancy. So we are actually paying more utility costs for our scatter site because of the vacancy. And because of elevated costs with utilities, that's why you see that there.
What are the obligation of the residents related to what utilities do we cover? What the residents
The resident
responsible
is
for?
responsible for paying their utilities in the unit, so we monitor that. So what we do, if utility is turned on in our name, we immediately identify the resident, who the resident is, and make sure that the utilities are turned back on. When a resident moves out, it rolls over into HOC, and we're responsible for paying on the vacant.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, if we were paying utilities, that would be a much bigger.
No. We make sure that the resident is actually paying their utilities, but on the vacants, we're responsible for
For
paying
those.
those vacants.
Yeah. Okay.
I know we'll have our write-off discussion later, but just why do we think VPC one accounts for such a large share?
That's a large portfolio, and when you actually, I wish I had put the numbers in.
But I
did
mean,
not.
we have other, properties that have equivalent numbers of units.
I think when we do a deep dive in there, I think that particular portfolio, it just suffered from we did have some high turnover over the years, and now we've stabilized it. We're making sure that we have stable staff, which we talk about later on, to make sure that we're monitoring that and actually getting back on track with occupancy and really working through our bad debt and our lease enforcement. I think that overall, with the big push that we have coming up with open house, small open house to really drive people to those communities, I think that we'll get back on track. I don't have enough history because I haven't been here long enough to have that, but I do know what we can do moving forward to secure the occupancy and lower some of the costs.
Yeah, it's just interesting that, I mean, we have other scattered sites, we have other large properties. Whether there was something about the
That
management.
particular asset, my understanding is that group of properties in that category was prior public housing. And so they all have come in at different affordability requirements. They're different aged portfolios. In some instances, it's public housing. We should also look to see if these are also, some of our properties have voucher holders. If they lose their voucher for any reason, there's also that exposure, certain exposure there. There's different numbers. It's really hard with this scattered site portfolio because these aren't all categorized in a certain part of the county. So it's difficult. But I think as we go forward, you'll hear what some of the efforts are to turn it around.
This may be a question that you can't really answer, but in your experience about you doing unit turnaround, is there any correlation whatsoever in terms of the level of expenditures for the units that are occupied by our lower AMI residents and those who are higher?
It really doesn't. It's about the residents themselves, and you have some residents that are below an AMI, and the housekeeping is amazing, and then you have some people at the top tier, and it's not. So it's not necessarily about the tier; it's about the resident. And one of the things that I try to stress to the team is that how we move people in is how they maintain. So if they have a good experience when they move in, 9 times out of 10, they will want to maintain. So we try to make sure when we do our move-ins that we give them the best we possibly can. And one of the things that we do along with Sean's team, we do our quarterly inspections, that we're in the units, that we have a good turnaround time when we're doing our maintenance work orders to show that we care. And I think that actually helps with some of the residents. But you always are going to have a small percentage of residents that are just not going to, take care of the unit, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your answer because it proves out in a way my thesis about the fact that there is no necessarily any correlation between housekeeping practice and habit and your income.
Correct.
Okay, because a lot of people think because people are poor that they live and have bad housekeeping and this, that, and the other. It's not necessarily true. Okay, because we have learned to be resourceful, and a lot of it means how you take care of your family. Because people value it. When you look at where people are living right now in some of our newer properties, and I hear some stories about what people found when they went into a unit, I'm astounded. Because we're providing some amazing quality housing. And it seems to me that if I walked in there and said, I'm going to take care of this, I'll make sure that I don't lose it because of my housekeeping. But it's interesting phenomenon. We just got to address it because it just puts more onus on us to provide more level of community social services and support to families. Period. Not by income, but families.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Next, we'll
think,
move into our, I'm sorry.
oh, no, I was just going to build what Roy was saying. I think, and I appreciate hearing the tone that we help set when folks are moving in, because I think a lot of it is about sort of expectations. And, to your comment, Roy, I think, in the past, there may have been like, well, people were poor, so we don't really expect them to take care of it.
Correct.
But that's not a fair
No, not at all.
expectation. And, and I think to the extent that we're setting that tone, and we're placing people in a place that, as you say, people want to take care of because it's nice. Hopefully, folks will, and it's not an income thing. It's that can be regardless. I think look at college kids and how they treat their
Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
So the expectations are that they're not going to take care of the place, so they don't. So
Yeah.
Next, we'll move into our contract management properties. And next slide. And as you see, what you had indicated earlier on our cash flow deficit property, our 3Bs, Bradley Crossing, Bradley Lane, and Bradley Park are leading, along with Westwood and Montgomery Arms. They're in the top tier for our negative cash flow on our third-party management properties. And I know Kelly will go into a little bit more detail in reference to that. However, they are leading the pack when we look at our deficit when it comes to cash flow. Next slide. When we're looking at our revenue shortfall by properties, you also will see the 3Bs are there as well. Well, actually, the third one is Westwood, and followed by Montgomery Arms. Westwood is a standalone when you look at that particular property. When you look at the revenue shortfall, over the years, we had some large groups move in and move out, which kind of sways the revenue for that particular property. And they've actually was able to leverage back the property into the low 90s. But when you have those ways, the property's occupancy will go down, and then we have to do a major lease up to kind of come back. So that's why they're there. Montgomery Arms, we're leveraging out their properties to leverage out in terms of its revenue.
And I recall with with Westwood that we had a relationship with Embassy where we had a number of Embassy staff staying there that I believe moved out in a large group. I forget which embassy, but yes.
As we move to the next slide, which is our maintenance and bad debt, as you see the trend, maintenance is number one, followed by our bad debt. And really, our maintenance is contributed to what we're looking at in terms of turning units from the number of people that we have moving out from bad debt. And as you see across both portfolios, it's the same story. So it's not a different story from our scatter sites. It's across the board in terms of what we're seeing, in Montgomery County and in just the industry right now. Our next slide actually moves into really just giving you guys, I know we talked about lease enforcement, but I really wanted to kind of walk you through, what I call the day in the life of how lease enforcement happens. And so you get the true picture. And you see the first 5 days is the late notice. And then days 6 to 10 is the formal notice. And this is all scheduled from Montgomery County that we have to follow. Days 11 through 15, we do a balance reminder. As you see, we get to days 20 to 35. That's when we get into the court hearing. As we get into days 35 to 50, we start getting into the eviction process. Days 50 to 120 is when we actually get into the eviction process. Now, keep in mind, this is just a standard process. If there is anything that the resident feels that they want to have a jury or any offset, it could actually prolong this. One of the key things that I will add is that our legal partners actually helped us in
provided us a standardized cover sheet. So when we're actually putting our packages together, that we can make sure that we have all the detail that we need to make sure that our cases are not pushed out. And I appreciate that because that really helped us, moving forward with, our court cases, that we have this cover sheet we submitted to make sure all the documents are there. But it's a tedious process to get somebody evicted over there. We don't really want to do that. But however, if you're not paying, then we have no choice but to evict.
That, the 50 to 120 plus days, that's a pretty big range there. So what I don't know if that is the estimate before you get to like a tenant,
Yeah.
doing
So
something, or there are other factors that are outside of our control that determine whether it's closer to 50 days or closer to 100.
it's outside of our control. It all depends on what happens when they get to court. It could be um, the resident may, I've seen cases where the resident has nowhere to go. And then they say, okay, we're going to give a stay order for the resident for additional 60 days, which is out of our control. We want them out, 30 days. But, I do understand, that they have nowhere to go. It's additional 60 days that we have to wait. So it's a variety of issues that can come up, when we get there. We're just happy that we get the judgment of possession of the unit. That way we can go ahead and do what we need to do to get the right person in the unit that's going to pay.
What happened? What happened on the day of eviction?
So the day of eviction, you actually have the sheriff. They're there. We have two representations from our team is also there, as well as the resident if they're home. We have to give the paperwork to show that we've given them the 14-day notice. They need a copy of that. If we don't provide that, then it's canceled. So that has really slowed down a lot of evictions, not just for us, but for a lot of landlords in the Montgomery County area. So it usually works pretty smoothly. Residents usually know because they get the 14-day notice to let them know that this eviction is happening. So you do have, unfortunately, some cases where the resident has nowhere to go, the resident's home, and, we try to work through that as best we can. We do use outreach. Our resident service partners are there if we know that we have those type of cases to kind of help along the way. But unfortunately, so far we haven't had any major incidents. And I think the 14-day notice really helps the resident because they know that on 14 days from this date, your eviction will be scheduled.
Yeah. What happens to their belongings?
Well, unfortunately, we do sit their belongings out. We give them a certain period of time to collect their belongings. On occasions, we have worked with residents to say you have, up until 5 days to come back in. We do work with the sheriff. We do have possession of the unit. So as long as we have possession of the unit, because that's the key, that we allow someone to come back and we will say, hey, at the end of this 5-day period, if your belongings are not out, we will set your belongings out. We try to work with most of our residents the best we can.
Yeah. I remember maybe 20 years or more ago in D.C., they started a program where they actually went around with a truck. They picked up people's belongings and they stored them for a certain period of time. And they had time to come back. And then what they found out was that the majority of people did not come back to claim their possessions.
Right.
And so then the city was incurring all these warehouse expenses for housing all this stuff, and then had to figure out how to dispose of it. So the thought of it was we don't see people stuck just out on the street, and people come and just pillage it, literally. Okay, I mean you move and they're there, right there. But it ultimately fell apart because of just the extraordinary lack of follow through on the part of the residents to claim their stuff. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
Ross, just a minor question. I'm so sorry.
Sure.
Just for my education. So days 1 to 5, those are starting at 90 days delinquent.
So days 1 through 5, anybody that's delinquent. So days 1 through 5, we look at if you haven't paid your rent, then we actually will serve you with some kind of notice, let you know.
After 30 days, if you're a whole month.
Correct.
A month.
Yep.
So it's
No, late
No, no,
notices.
late.
If
No, I'm
you
sorry.
don't
The late
pay
notices.
before the 5th, you
Yeah,
will be reminded that you are late in,
So,
of course. Yes.
so from then to eviction is a 3-month process,
correct.
4-month process.
And the one thing that we have seen in some cases, we have seen some cases actually, a lot shorter than that. So there's really depending on what's going on, and Montgomery County is moving a little bit faster, but we do see some delays in some areas as well.
And in some cases, I imagine uh, tenants don't wait to be evicted.
Oh no,
Yeah.
unfortunately, some do.
No, I'm sure a lot, many do. They take advantage of all that time, but I guess, I mean, because again, getting ahead to our write-offs, there's a number that just vacate, so.
We try to work. I mean, we reach out, our resident service partners, our property managers, all along this process, we're reaching out, to our residents to kind of say, hey, come in, let us know what's going on, where are you with anything, just to really try to work with them. Because at the end of the day, our goal is not to evict, but to keep, our residents in place if we can. But if you're not able to pay or, just do not communicate with us, we have no choice.
So you have some, I guess, some kind of system where you are tracking every person who is in this eviction queue, right? So if I want to know where Paul is he in day 15 or is he in day 30? Where is he? You can tell me that, right?
Yeah, so what we put together for President Andrews and anyone else, we actually have a tracker, internal tracker, that the team updates. And so we can go and see where, Ross Lloyd is, for the process, and it actually spells out, where they are. And then we update it, twice a month because that's usually generally the type of movement that we see. It's not something you see on a weekly basis, but you do see more activity, twice a month, and we update that. Next slide is actually just going over, the HOC managed where we are. And as you see, currently we have about 309 families working through the process. 10-day notice is 114, legal process is 163, and upcoming evictions are 32. So we're working through that process. Hopefully that it doesn't get to that. And we have seen quite a few residents pay their balances before the evictions. So, hopefully they'll continue that trend. And knowing that, with HOC, we love to have you as, one of our families and residents here, but you have to pay to live in our communities.
So does that, it's about maybe 300, a little over 300 units. Does that constitute our entire universe of delinquent?
Just for our not,
Or is this just those that are in some kind of stage of enforcement?
that's in our some kind of stage of enforcement. So once we get past that tier, then we look at the next tier. And those are the ones where we've given those residents we've given the 10-day notice. They're in some type of legal, and we know we have eviction. So at any given time, if a person doesn't pay, like say for next month, then that person may be added to the list. So we look on a month-to-month basis.
But this would be current of the,
As of April.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so it's not that there are some delinquent units out there, some properties that we just have not, that we're working our way through. We haven't gotten to them yet.
No. Unless they actually come up, say for delinquents starting in May.
No,
Yeah, then they would show correct.
Yes. Okay, good.
I do want to note that we do have some thresholds in terms of when we file. If your rent is $5 and you're a month late, we're not going to start the process. So without getting into too much detail here, there might be people who are a couple of months late because their amount is still negligible.
Yeah.
So yes.
Fair enough.
Next slide is our contract managed, and it's to say it's a larger portfolio, so the numbers is a little bit larger. So on our contract management side, total number that we have in lease enforcement is 1,400. As you see, 10-day notice is 564. Legal process, we have 279, and scheduled eviction dates are 564.
Okay, that explains why that was a much lower number than I thought.
So, and it just kind of speaks to, as when you look at both portfolios, you see the trend. There's not one that's different than the other, but across the board, we're fighting, unfortunately, downsizing of jobs, residents just not having the money to pay the rent. And next up, our asset manager.
I mean, that's a
Vice President.
huge percentage. It's like 20% or more of that.
And when you're
of
looking
that
at the
portfolio.
third-party portfolio, it's a larger rent, so it's a bigger delta. Because then you have more of your market residents that are impacted by government furloughs, downsize, those sorts of things. So you see that impact. But we are doing some amazing things. We do have some initiatives that we are working through along with my partners in asset management and maintenance that Kelly will go over.
So Ross, just to
Sure.
summarize, so going through our managed properties versus contracted and the contracted managed properties, we have almost 600 families that are scheduled for eviction sometime in the next 1 to 3 months.
Correct. Or it could be 4, just to make sure we don't have. Correct.
Have you found that in terms of the unit turn time for HOC managed versus the third-party managers, have you found the assistant time frame? How long are they taking to turn a unit versus how much it's taking
We'll
us?
allow our Vice President of Maintenance to respond to that question.
Good morning, Commissioners, President Andrew, HOC staff, and members of the public. For the record, my name is Sean Asbury, Vice President of Maintenance. So I produce a weekly report each week, and that's actually a status that I actually present. And right now, the third-party managed as well as HOC are running both between 2 and 4 days to turn units.
Really?
Yes.
That's damn good, man.
Yes.
Good.
We're ready.
Yes.
So let's turn it over to Kelly to highlight some of the activities that we've been undertaking, as well as share some additional insight in regards to what's happening across the market.
Thank you, President Andrews. Again, Kelly Dickerson, Vice President of Asset Management for HOC. HOC divisions do strive to work collaboratively to accomplish the Commission's goals and objectives. Given the challenges of the market to property operations, we've developed initiatives to improve results. And I'll highlight a few that are on many that are on this slide. Development of a corporate housing partnership and employer-based leasing opportunities with local companies and organizations for master leases. Creation of budget performance tracking mechanisms to monitor overall portfolio performance by leveraging reporting and our analytical features within software platforms. Exploration of retail and ancillary income opportunities to strengthen property cash flow. Division leadership contact with third-party management leadership specifically to resolve issues and prioritize progress. And utilizing our resident services, which Ross mentioned, to contact and offer resources to delinquent tenants as a support to lease enforcement efforts. And I think we've really expanded that. It's been very helpful at the 3Bs, as we call them, because we really see a little bit better communication, a little bit sussing out a little bit more of what type of resources those residents need, and we're getting to them just a little bit earlier so that they perhaps feel less bombarded by the notices that we are required and do send, as well as their interactions with our third-party property managers. So those are just a few of the many that we are uptaking to make
Could you
progress.
say a little bit more about the exploration of retail, ancillary
Sure.
revenue
So-
opportunities? I mean, I assume we're not putting retail in our residential units, so I'm just
No.
curious. Like, if
No, but if we have an opportunity to find a space, and there's one of those in the portfolio with Oaks at Four Corners, where there is a dead space. Is that a dead space that at all has any anticipatory storage capabilities? I mean,
when
that's
you
not-
say dead space, do you mean, is there a structure there now, or
if it's not a unit, right, but there's some common area space there. Like we have a hair salon in the Four Corners, in a space that was not used. Now, that was an old example. I think a newer example would be, are we using space that is not usable for something that we can sell storage? Is storage valuable? You mentioned storage is very valuable. But in the rest, it's just looking at our retail portfolio a little bit more competitively. What can we offer as first floor ground retail that can be offered in other buildings in different areas? Okay. Next slide, please. So I'd like to provide some market context to the HOC portfolio performance. And this chart focuses on the submarkets in which HOC properties are struggling. Principally, it summates that market rent growth is trending negatively, and that vacancy, particularly in Bethesda and Silver Spring, have surpassed the 3-year high for CoStar. Additionally, vacancy in North Bethesda, Gaithersburg, and Wheaton are below the high, but notably higher than the 5-year low. I think that's important to point out that we have mixed income properties. We are suffering the same type of trends and headwinds that other properties are facing. And notably, our population is impacted more deeply if they're in an affordable housing situation. However, these submarkets are anchored by a combination of high-income households, established infrastructure, and ongoing demand for housing, retail, and transit. Rent growth and positive absorption are likely to improve given the historical patterns for these markets. In all respects, this illuminates that mixed income properties are facing some challenges. I repeated myself there, but sustained economic uncertainty, which we've talked about, inflationary pressures on household incomes, slower federal employment, and periodic pressure on rents and concessions with the delivery of new multifamily supply, all in total can have impacts on how the markets are performing and how we perform within them. Next slide.
But
Oh,
why is the vacancy rate in Bethesda so much higher? I mean, you see so much construction going on there. And
part of it is deliveries that were made during COVID.
Yeah. So
slow absorption.
Okay.
In fact, negative absorption this last quarter.
Yeah. But I mean, we're not just us, but the county generally is adding more units in Bethesda. So there's anticipation of going
and return to norms, right? Because if you look at the historic low, I mean, it was good.
Yeah.
So and there have been times in Bethesda where people thought that they couldn't find enough housing.
Yeah, it's interesting that the low in Bethesda is still higher than.
Yeah, that's the 5-year low. There's probably some more. I didn't go all 20 years.
Yeah, and I guess most of the construction that 5 years
right.
includes is the entire COVID period. So.
I think we went back to when I came to Bethesda back in 2006. Yeah. Probably even a lower number.
But what I think is important for us to also highlight here, when we talk about the 3 Bs and the occupancy at the 3 Bs, and us, of course, having a lot of bad debt we're working through and lease enforcement, our occupancy level is not that far off. In fact, it's at par with what that submarket is reflecting. And as you've just noted, there's new product. Some of the new product is leasing up faster than others, but they have a lot of new amenities, etc. So we're competing with the new product as well with our 3 Bs. And we're having to be very strategic. What wasn't on the prior slide is our property management and asset management teams have worked really closely on creating a very creative strategy for marketing the 3 Bs because it's a different subgroup as well in terms of affordability that we're trying to attract there. And so just giving some context is what we're trying to do here in terms of how are our 3 Bs holding up in a market where, quite frankly, the occupancy is very similar to what that submarket is. We have higher challenges with people not paying rent, and we're having to target certain populations, and we can't offer as much as the brand new shiny delivery. So just giving that level of context.
Is there a different demographic in terms of age of populations in these different areas? For example, does Bethesda tend to have a higher age
don't know.
standard than, for example, than would Wheaton or Silver Spring?
Right. I don't know the demographics off the top of my head. I think that's a fair question. I know we've looked at that in the past with opportunities to develop there, but I'd have to get back to you, Commissioner.
Yeah. Sure. Don't worry about doing any research. I just asked the question.
Good question.
Yeah, just another quick observation. Despite the higher vacancy rate, it's also a significantly higher average market rent. So
Question is though, is again, rent growth, how
Yeah.
much trend is the rent growth? If it's ameliorating year over year,
fair.
then,
That's true.
but thank you, President. That is very much the point of, and even with Westwood, as we mentioned, as we lease up, and that was really helpful. But again, that's even a little bit different where it's positioned in Bethesda as the 3Bs are.
Have we named our 3Bs yet?
Yes, the 3Bs. No. No.
Maybe,
We are going to
maybe it's a
do.
problem.
No.
I mean, the
No. There's an effort to rebrand and reposition in terms of marketing. That's a part of the larger strategy. We do need the properties to begin to generate some revenue to offset the cost of doing a whole rebrand, but we will be looking at that as well. Yes. And of course, there's many other efforts underway. I do want to answer your question in regards to what we know a little bit about the demographics, especially for the 3Bs. I do know that there's not a lot of children in that portfolio, so it's not large families. And I think it's fair to say that there are also not necessarily a lot of seniors. Seems to be a working class group of people who are able to walk to the metro, go to work, single to family households. We know that based on resident services, thinking about what kind of programming might be of interest, and homework club is not coming up on the top of the list for this group. So, okay.
And to that point on the next slide, as the president alluded to, that is very much why I think the economic pressures are having such a deep impact on that population. The renters in general across the market generally carry in Montgomery County and across Maryland carry a cost burden of 47% when the ideal average is closer to 30. So the cost of housing is really very, very prominent. And you combine that with the additional burdens from higher healthcare costs, which I think is underestimated at this point, energy and gas costs, as well as food costs. You're really mounting on top of our vulnerable populations as well as our market renters quite a lot of money. And so what you're seeing is qualified lease traffic is changing. The applicants are often carrying prior rental debt, either related to COVID or to perhaps another emergency, as well as below average credit. And that makes it really difficult going through sometimes 100 people in a month and finding only so many actually qualify. And you do want to be careful because you don't want to put them or the property in a position where unfortunately they can't make rent 3 or 4 months into the lease. But to that point, this is a population in the 3B that was very affected by the federal employment layoffs.
Yeah.
And even if they only had a disruption in their income, their ability to recover was affected. And even after that, some of them chose to leave the area or still chose to move in with family members. We've found out from our resident services and our third-party property management surveys, they decided to conserve their resources because they weren't sure what was going to happen. And some people took early retirement and now are finding they have to go back to some sort of minimum wage job just to keep up with the rising costs. All of those combinations, I think, affect a lot of rental housing, but absolutely can affect us even more so. So I do want to give a little bit of more time to what I think is going to be some fantastic news. So I'd like to pass it over to my esteemed colleague, Sean Asbury, to share more information on what we can control with regard to utility and cost management savings in the portfolio.
Thank you very much. Again, welcome. Good morning, Commissioners, President Andrews, HOC staff, and members of the public. Again, for the record, my name is Sean Asbury. I'm the Vice President of Maintenance. So my presentation today is to highlight how targeted maintenance operations, preventive maintenance initiatives, utility conservation efforts are helping improve operational efficiency and reduce controllable expenses across the HOC portfolio. You'll see some measure of tangible results tied to LED lighting projects, PEPCO conservation programs, water conservation initiatives, and stronger operational controls, which are all designed to support the long-term portfolio stability and asset preservation. As you can see in this slide here, and before we get into the scattered site, I'd like to highlight that the work order backlog for the scattered site properties, which dated back many years, is no longer in existence due to the extremely hard work of our maintenance staffs, as well we no longer have any so-called rentable down units as well. So that's something I wanted to highlight prior to this presentation. So on this slide here, we're outlining a targeted operational cost reduction strategy focused on 16 priority scattered site properties. Together, these properties generated about $4.24 million in FY26 maintenance and utility related expenses across 5 key costs. And the primary objective of this initiative is to reduce avoidable operational expenses through tighter operation controls, standardized procedures, and a more proactive maintenance model as well. And based on the analysis, we projected approximately $387,000 in year one savings, which represented about 9.1% reduction against the current operating run rate over a 3-year period. The projected accumulating impact exceeds $1.1 million, assuming consistent execution and program stabilization. The first major initiative is the vacant unit control SOP, and this focuses on reducing unnecessary utility consumption in vacant units by implementing thermostat standards, monitoring for leaks, running toilets, reducing unnecessary electrical loads, and improving contractor accountability during vacancy period. As occupancy improves and vacant units are leased, that magnitude of savings generated from vacant unit utility controls will naturally decrease over time as that happens. And then our second major initiative is the expansion of the preventive maintenance program, which is going very well. And the goal of this is to shift maintenance operation from a reactive emergency repair toward a planned maintenance activity. And by doing so, we anticipate measurable reductions in overtime, emergency response call, and inefficient labor utilization while improving long-term asset preservation. Next slide, please. So in this slide, which needs maintenance spends by cost category, this slide, which needs and will be cleaned up a bit, breaks down where the projected savings are expected to occur across the portfolio. Utilities are projected to decrease approximately $93,000 annually through tighter vacant unit utility controls and also water conservation efforts. Maintenance salaries are projected to improve by approximately $177,000 through operational efficiencies, better scheduling, reducing duplication of work, and increased preventive maintenance productivity as well. And in overtime, which presents one of the largest opportunities, we're projecting approximately $117,000 in overtime reduction as we reduce the after-hour emergency activity and improve planned maintenance scheduling. So overall, the portfolio is projecting a net reduction of about $437,000 annually. Next slide, please. So in this slide here, spend share and projected savings. This slide visually demonstrates how the current maintenance spend is distributed across the portfolio. And the major properties affected and that will benefit are the VPC1, which is about 26%, VPC2 at 20%, Scattered Sites 1, DevCorp 13%, and the State Partnership, which is about 12%. And what's important here is to understand that where the portfolio is most heavily weighed down operational. That's what's really important. Maintenance salaries, overtime, utility collectively represents the majority of the controllable operation costs. So the projected savings strategy intentionally targets the categories where we have the greatest ability to really influence operational behavior without negatively impacting our residents or the service levels that we provide to them. So the analysis also reinforces that this is not simply a budget cutting exercise. The focus is operational efficiency, resource optimization, and reducing preventable expense drivers. That's the entire process there. Next slide, please. So here, utility spend analysis. This is year over year, and it's important to recognize that some of these expenses used to determine these savings were accrued. So these next few slides really represent actual FY26 savings. So to highlight how utility conservation projects are helping reduce operation expenses across the portfolio. So these savings are directly tied to LED lighting retrofits, no-cost PEPCO conservation programs, improved thermostat controls, leak detection efforts, as well as water conservation construction projects as well, with the overall goal being to strengthen operational accountability while reducing available utility consumption. Next slide, please. Next up is our electrical spending results. So this slide demonstrates the financial impact of the electrical conservation initiative across the portfolio. Savings are being driven by LED retrofits, PEPCO energy efficiency programs, improved HVAC controls, and reduced electrical usage in vacant units. The effort really shows how small operational improvements can really generate meaningful portfolio-wide savings. And our next slide here. So this are the results of the property level electrical comparison. So the slides provide a property level breakdown of electrical spending and savings realized. The analysis confirms that conservation efforts are producing results across multiple properties through lighting upgrades, utility controls, and energy efficient initiatives. The data also helps identify properties that may require additional operation or equipment review. Next slide, please.
So, and
Yes.
just to be clear, so these are reflecting cost savings, not just reductions in usage.
Yes,
Right?
that's correct.
So even as price costs, maybe going up, the reduction in usage has been enough to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That associated with the cost
Yeah.
measures that we implemented as well.
Which is interesting that, and then it gets back to our question about utilities, though. So I guess adding properties and HQ and others. That's been. It was over $1 million. So it was like what 20%. So it's interesting though that over the rest of our portfolio, we reduced costs. But the additional properties would have been more than 20% of additional utility expenses.
Right, and it's more of as our CFO shared, it's when we bring those assets into our portfolio, now there are higher utility expenses, but there's also should have been higher revenue, right? And so it's just the sheer math of we added in a new
I guess in some ways I'm a little surprised because we didn't add 20% new
Well, it's
properties.
right. And so it's the combination. We added properties, plus we had increased expenses around when we have all of these evictions, we now have to carry the cost of the utilities for those units. But at the
That
same
would have
time,
otherwise.
right, on the resident to pay their utilities. And then at the same time, we have Mr. Asbury working really, really hard on saving every dollar, every single cent. And so these numbers might seem nominal, but they are huge in the fact that every way that we can try to reduce our costs, in applying this initially, his approach was let me just sample a few and then get larger and larger. So these are efforts that will continue to expand across the portfolio. Yeah.
And it's great that we're taking advantage of programs like from PEPCO or whatever, where we're not having to put out a large expense to bring our own costs down. PEPCO is providing some of that for us.
Yes, that's
so.
right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so our next slide here, this slide highlights the results of the water conservation construction projects that are currently underway and some which have concluded. Savings are being generated through plumbing upgrades, leak detection, fixture improvements, and repairs to continuous running toilets and plumbing systems as well. And these efforts support both utility reduction and long-term asset preservation. And I might also add, we're also really looking at water bills and scrutinizing these water bills as well, because in some cases we've gotten very large credits for the properties because the way the water process works, the way they charge is it really depends on the number of units on the property. So we found in some cases that a 300 unit property was being charged for one unit, which really escalated that bill. And we've been able to go back and get those credits as well. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide here, property level water conservation comparison. This slide breaks down water conservation performance at the individual property level. The analysis helps identify which properties are producing the strongest results and where additional conservation efforts may be needed. This also really creates a framework for ongoing utility benchmarking and operational monitoring as well. Next slide, please. So this is a combined portfolio performance. This slide consolidates the overall impact of the conservation and operational efficiency initiative. The savings reflected are directly tied to LED lighting projects, the PEPCO conservation program, the no-cost lighting initiative, and water conservation construction efforts. And collectively, these initiatives improve operational efficiency, reduce controllable expenses, and support long-term portfolio stability as well. And then our final slide, please. So these are recommended next steps. For the recommendation, next step really focuses on execution, measurement, and accountability. First, we're going to standardize PEPCO LED and Empower focus on participation and water conservation across the remaining portfolio properties. Secondly, we're going to track monthly utility variances and with trigger thresholds on lines of 10 to minus 10 or plus 10%. Versus the trailing 3-month average. Third, we're going to re-engage properties that lag acceptable performance and warrant a second look. And then finally, we're going to continue evaluating operational data to identify additional opportunities for efficiency improvements, cost reduction, and long-term portfolio standardization. And this is the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
I want to thank all three of you for what you all have presented today. It's really very insightful and understanding in a lot more detail what goes into the budget, and to realize that while we may sit here and say, "Oh my God, how do we achieve that level of this effort?" And I feel really assured that you all are doing the work at the level you're doing it to try to really pay attention to costs and outlays and expenditures and reductions and ways to save the agency money. I just want to compliment you all for this level of work. I hope that this is going to be made available on our website so people can see this.
We are streaming live on YouTube. And yes, this will be on our website. Of course, yes, this meeting is a live meeting. So this is streaming, but it's material as well. The PowerPoint presentation will be uploaded to supplement our materials that were already provided to the public. And yes.
Yeah, I want to thank you all very much for the level of
Yeah, but building on what Roy's saying, like what I really appreciate is, obviously we've expressed a lot of frustration with the budget over several years, but like there's always acknowledgement about how much is not within our control. I really appreciate that we are taking a look at what is within our control here and finding ways to, reduce expenses or, minimize. And again, going back to those utilities, I guess I would hope then that as we work through the enforcement mechanisms and we reduce our vacancy rate, we can probably expect to see a reduction, a further reduction,
Yes.
based on us not having to absorb those the costs of the utility costs of vacant units. At the same time, I appreciate that we are looking, how do we reduce our costs for vacant units that we are carrying, and minimizing those costs as well.
And these are, I just want to acknowledge the team is tremendous in terms of the work and the effort that's underway. The leadership, as well as their entire teams that's supporting the leaders that are here, are working tirelessly. And this doesn't encapsulate all of the efforts. For example, they're doing bulk procurements to try to reduce costs where we can. There's a lot of efforts underway to try our best to stabilize the assets.
And I appreciate that this is like a, a cross-team effort, that this is not, well, we're looking in silos here.
It's a lot of collaboration.
Working together to bring these costs down. It's great. It's good to see. Thank you.
It'll be interesting to see once Hillendale comes online, with all of the energy pieces that are associated with Hillendale, whether or not there's anything there that, especially going into our new construction, if we replicate that, or is the cost of putting in that kind of infrastructure so expensive that you don't get your real savings until out years, you know what I mean? So you're not getting real-time savings, you're getting over time. So it'll be interesting to see when Hillendale comes online, what those numbers look like.
And the savings will be for those residents in terms of their utility bills.
Yeah.
But as we have exposure, yes. So thank you, team, and thank you, commissioners, for your indulgence. We will, of course, encourage all commissioners to watch this meeting, send the materials, and to the extent we can in our future larger board meetings, spotlight many of these initiatives. Wanted to bring it to the BFA because you're carrying the water in regards to understanding why we have the gaps, and hopefully this was helpful in giving additional context. We have gone well over time, but the last few items are pretty quick housekeeping items. So I'd like to ask the finance.
One point, we were talking about retail lease up. I was recently last month at a retail forum. You're talking about how you do creative lease up of rental spaces. And an idea came up was if you all are looking to, for example, lease space in your new headquarters building, and you want to find a vendor, what you ought to do is go out and talk to some of the street vendors who are doing their trucks and stuff like that, who are looking to find a place to come into. And if we can find a way to make that work and make a way to begin to identify a plethora of potential retail users, they are smaller, but we can maybe find how you use the space. But this is I thought of a creative idea. And in fact, this one center has leased up all of their properties to former vendors who were street vendors with their trucks. And so I just want to pass that on.
Thank you for that idea.
If it works, you send me my bonus.
Thank you.
You'll double your salary.
Thanks. All right. Finance team, if you wouldn't mind, let's try to move as swiftly as we can through these last items. Thank you.
I guess we're doing with uncollectible tenant rents.
Presenting this item is Siwa Prince Obijan, Accounting Manager for HOC.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, Commissioners, staff, and member of the public. For the record, my name is Sewa Prince Obijan, Accounting Manager with HOC Finance Division. Today, we are seeking your support for the write-off of collectible tenant account receivable for the third quarter of fiscal year 2026. HOC current policy is to provide for any tenant account receivable balance in excess of 90 days. Additionally, HOC periodically proposes the write-off of uncollected former resident balances. Can you go to page 2, please? The proposed write-off of former tenant account receivable balances for the third quarter of fiscal year 2026, FY26, is at $340,548. Unit abate on vacated is the largest driver of write-off, accounting for 56%. Here's our comparative analysis. So for the in this quarter, we are reporting $341K in write-off, which compared to 652 in FY25 Q3 at the same period. The FY26 Q2, we have a reported 701,000 in write-off compared to 303K in FY25 at the same period. And finally, FY26 Q1, we have reported 814K in write-off compared to 486 in FY25 Q1. The FY26 Q3 write-off of 341K represents 54% decrease compared to the last quarter. But I wanted to point out that this 54% decrease in the write-off is due to timing, and we expect the Q4 write-offs to be in line with the normal trend. Page 4, please. We continue our lease enforcement effort with a focus on large delinquent accounts, coupled with unit inspection to identify vacated units. The Q3 write-off only impacted the opportunity housing properties, and the properties with the largest delinquent account are the MHLP 9 balance of 100,000 and VPC 1 Corp balance of 140K. The next anticipated write-off of receivable balance will be for the fourth quarter of FY26, which will cover April 1st through June 30th, 2026. Today, we are seeking your support to recommend to the Commission the write-off of uncollectible account receivable for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2026. I'm sorry, the third quarter of fiscal year 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Can I get a motion to recommend this forward to full commission?
Second.
Probably moving second, all in favor, signify by aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. So ordered. Thank you very much. It's good to be able to have a 56% reduction from last quarter.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. So the last item on the agenda for today is, in fact, the presentation of the tax credit audits.
I'm sorry, do we move that last to the commission?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. For the record, Tim Getzinger, Senior VP of Finance and CFO. The following is regarding the calendar year 2025 audits. We have 20 properties that require calendar year audits. There are 17 low-income housing tax credits. We technically have 4 other LLCs. Only 3 of the LLCs require it. One of the Hillendales does not require it. Please go to the top of page 2. This chart indicates those audits that have been completed. As the chart details, there are 12 that have been completed. We were batting 12 for 12. 12 audits were clean, unmodified opinions. We also expect the next 8 to also be clean. What staff is requesting is 2 things. One is to forward these 12 audits to the commission for approval, and subsequently, as the next 8 are available, to go straight to the commission, assuming that they are clean. If they are not, we would come to the BFNA to discuss those details. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No, and I'm comfortable proposing.
Can I get a motion to advance this forward to the full commission with the recommended course as relates to the other remaining 8 that have not been completed, but will have, in fact, unless they are found to have some kind of discrepancy, will be, in fact, approved?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Nay, so ordered. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Being that there is no other business before the Budget Finance and Audit Committee, I now adjourn this meeting as of 11:02 a.m.
Thank you.